last 15 years I've been teaching children how to swim. A few years ago I decided I wanted to set up my own business and my own swim school. Timing wasn't right, it was around the COVID period, young family, it was kind of a perfect storm. It was kind of through this pressure and this difficult period of time I realised how much ADHD and dyslexia was affecting me as a person. Around this same sort of period, my son got a formal diagnosis for ADHD, and it's meant that I've had to kind of rediscover what it means to have ADHD and dyslexia. And also, if I want to kind of take my business forward and grow it, I've got to kind of lean into the things I'm good at and also understand the things I'm not so good at.
So James, where are we off to today?
We're just driving to my parents', which still feels like home, even though I haven't lived at home for a long time. My parents constantly have me popping over. I quite often go there and do work. I've built an office in the garden, but it's just not quite completed yet. So sometimes to get a bit of peace and quiet, I end up back at my parents'. A yellow bus just like this. Someone was driving up to school, someone fell off the bus, got run over, and then someone ran and took the slippers off their feet and ran off. Like that's how poor. You know, that's real poverty. And this is around this area. That's where you'd have people who had lost their limbs, and instead of having a wheelchair, it'd be a skateboard. They'd have blocks of wood, and they'd be moving themselves along.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Terry Nugent. I'm James's dad. I help him out from time to time in some of the business aspects and administration aspects, the stuff that is less glamorous than teaching swimming. James was always very precocious, is maybe the word. He was very advanced. He got into things very quickly, learned skills very easily, wasn't too bothered at that age about the consequences of what he was doing. Happy, smiling, lots of fun, really. Except for one occasion. It was his birthday, and we had a clown coming round. James had his friends there for a birthday party, and this clown, Coco the clown, came around, all dressed up in the outfit, red nose and all the rest of it. And James was scared out of his wits when he saw this guy. Apart from that, he could take anything. What we became much more aware of was dyslexia, because he started school. By this time we were living in Nigeria. He was at the American International School, and while all the developmental milestones as he was growing up were met perfectly well, but he just couldn't get on with this reading. You know, at first you think, oh well, you know, children develop differently at different speeds. It'll come, it'll click, but it didn't. And one of the teachers there took him and gave him some extra lessons, and she's the one who spoke to us about principally dyslexia. And it was only a little bit later, I mean maybe some months later, when we were with a specialist who then diagnosed the ADHD in addition to the dyslexia.
We are like twins. Even though mine are more inattentive, I'm not as hyperactive outside, but internally my brain is constantly thinking, and I'm moving from one thing to another. I don't finish things, and I run my own business. I tried to work in a corporate world. I didn't cope. James he's got so much knowledge. He's going to be a successful dad, and he does the best he does for Lennon. And I think he's on a perfect pathway, Lennon, with the support from his dad.
I mean, I'm enormously proud of the way he behaves with his children, and whether it's playing with them, encouraging them, leading them, teaching them, you know, I really find that fantastic.
Did hedgehogs used to be big?
Did hedgehogs? I think almost all animals.
Yeah,
they're all animals because at some point.
How big were hedgehogs?
On planet Earth, what happens is. So I'm a bit of an early bird. So I get up about 5 a.m. every day, go to the gym. For me to be productive and get the most out of things, I have to get up early. So I kind of tend to get home at 7, and the boys wake up at 7. It's quite chaotic, loud, lots of running around. I think my house is, I think we're all kind of morning people. So lots of energy. Up until now, he's kind of been saying, Dada, Dada, Dada. You know, swimming is, for me, non-negotiable. And once they can swim, move on and start doing some other activities. I think playing a team sport can also be quite good for kids to get used to, you know, working with other children. But for me, swimming and a martial art, like whether it's boxing, jiu-jitsu, karate, teaching children how to control their anger.
And then it leads to the sea.
Here we go.
Take it. And his house leads to the sea.
That would be an amazing house, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
If you work really hard at school, you might be able to get one of those houses.
Should we go and get you changed? Yeah?
We need to finish really quick.
Yeah.
Because we need to do the tricky words. We didn't do them yesterday. If we miss your tricky words today, then you lose your screen time. We can't have 2 days in a row. One thing is my older son needs quite a lot of pushing to get him into the shower, to get him to eat his breakfast, to get him to get changed. It's constant pressure.
Okay, next one is...
Wait, 1, 2, 3.
Where? Next one.
You see, I really hate being late. So as long as I have kind of checkpoints in the morning where I anchor and I say, so if you're down for breakfast at 7:30, then you've got to finish your breakfast by 8. Then we do tricky words, a bit of maths, finish by 8:15. We leave the door at 8:30. And if we do that, it's spot on. So I've got to, because I tend to get stressed and I don't want to be stressed and shouting at him before school. So as long as we kind of hit those checkpoints, then we tend to get there on time. Oh, I win today. Cheers. Lennon, you ready?
Why does he need to film us getting out?
Because it's part of the story.
The story of James and Lennon.
Yeah, and the swim school.
I just said my own name incorrect.
Yeah.
Lennon.
Let's get you up. Sit down. You've got to sit down. If you want to have your shoes, let's get you a jacket. There's a lot going on, but not too much chaos. Organised chaos is the way I look at it. As long as Lennon gets to school on time, and the children have been fed, and then Marley gets dropped to nursery, then we're all good. I always think if I'm ready, able to work, by 9:15, then I'm on time. I've done well. Your children have been hurt in the process. Last Thursday.
Hello, you've got babies.
So I came up with the idea of trying to find a private pool where I could invite some customers along to try and capture some of our lessons, how we do it, and capture their progress. I thought, you know, some people haven't actually seen what a lesson looks like. They've got young children that never started lessons, and then you actually find some people who do go to lessons and they're actually shocked and surprised to see what a really good lesson looks like. So I thought it'd be good to kind of showcase that, and hopefully that would help me develop this personal brand that I'm trying to kind of go with. And stand up. Can you see now we can take them off? Put them back on your forehead. No, not off completely, just there. Good. Come on over here. Then we're going to spin you around. Oh, you're getting dizzy again. Get dizzy. Get dizzy. Are you dizzy? Yeah, I get really dizzy when I do that. We get really wobbly. Oh, 3, 2, 1, blow your bubbles. Yeah, good. At least you're closing your mouth. Ready? Blow your bubbles. Just your lips. Fantastic. You didn't get it in your mouth. Do it again. Show mummy. Don't let it go in your mouth. Just close your mouth.
So, you know, for me, I'm trying to be as organic and as real as possible, because, you know, for me, what I care about is swimming. You know, swimming's made such a difference to my life, and, you know, without finding sports and swimming, I could have then ended up down a completely different path. I've been super fortunate to have a great friend that I went to school with who's helping me along with that journey. And so, you know, what we're trying to do is to be authentic, be who I am, you know, the swimming person, you know, locally where I've been teaching for the last 15 years, you know, I've built a great reputation around just being genuine. You know, none of it was ever planned. I never thought, you know, I would be a fantastic swimming teacher. I never thought I would have such a great reception. I never thought children would warm to me in the way they do. So it's trying to kind of build on that. Trying, for me, being transparent and open and just showing who we are is the most important thing, because I don't want to try and create this image that isn't real. I don't want people to come along and think, oh, I've been sold this dream. It's who we are. You know, we genuinely care. We genuinely want the best for the children, and that is the brand that we're trying to kind of portray.
Attacking me with a shark. He's been biting me. He's been taking my finger off. All right, so what we're gonna do? Hiya, hiya, hiya.
This has completely evolved and morphed. You know, when I first started out, I always knew when I was teaching swimming, you know, I always knew I was going to set up my own business. And I first started off as a one-man band. You know, I found this private pool. I made some good money that first year, and I thought, fantastic, this is it. You know, I'm just going to do this for the next 20 years. And it was during that period in time, I leant over to kiss my son goodnight, and bang, as I leant up, shooting pain in my back, pain down my left leg, couldn't go to the toilet, ended up at A&E, and I had a compressed my L5-S1 in my spine, and I realised as a one-man band, you know, for that 10 weeks where I couldn't work, I got no money, I couldn't teach lessons, and I realised it wasn't sustainable being this one-man band who does literally everything. And it was from that moment onwards, as I was lying in bed unable to do anything, I thought, okay, I've got to change what I'm doing, because, you know, there's got to be some longevity, there's got to be a way I can support my family where, you know, it's not 100% reliant on me to do everything. And I think as the business has grown, your horizons change, and you start to think, you know, what I wanted to get to, I kind of got to really quite quickly. And then your horizons broaden, and then I start to think, actually, I want to impact more people. I want to help more families. I want to be able to teach people things I know, that might not be able to access our swimming lessons. And you know, there's lots of amazing things I've picked up along the journey, because, you know, I've worked at lots of different swimming pools, at lots of different coaches, and what I've always done is I've always thought I'm trying to build a toolbox. So every teacher who does something cool or interesting, someone with great customer service, I think, actually, yeah, I could borrow that, I'll stick it in my toolbox. And eventually I've built this massive toolbox that I think, you know, lots of parents could do more with their children. You know, teachers could benefit from seeing that there's other ways to do things, thinking outside the box, and I think it's from that really what I want to do. I want to be able to show people and make swimming more accessible, and bring a little bit more joy into swimming. It's almost like the universe has shown me, you know, I'm going to give you another lifeline. And so I had this friend, Lewis John, who anytime I had some kind of business question, things that I wanted to know in terms of business, I would ask him and say, you know, could we sit down and talk about this? And he gave me loads and loads of free, friendly advice. And when I decided, okay, I'm going to actually try and take this further, he was the first person I called, and you know, and he's still the first person I call anytime I have an idea. He quite often says to me, you know, it's a good idea, but, you know, let's try and stick to the program. Let's go one step at a time. And, you know, I absolutely need that. There's no way I will ever get to where I want to get to without having the right people around me, because, like I said, I'm a bit like that racehorse. I need someone to pull the reins back and say, actually, James, okay, let's focus on this for now, and let's kind of do it step by step. And I think with the right people, I think I've got the work ethic, I've got that hard work, I've got that drive. I think we can do it. I remember doing a video with Alfie, who's our multimedia guru, and he'd come to the office, and we were trying to kind of do a little bit of a promo video and talk a little bit about the business. And I sat there and I could feel like sweat kind of developing on my forehead. I couldn't string any words, I couldn't put anything together. And I think because I had tried to memorize kind of talking points and things I wanted to say, my brain was kind of going into hyperdrive. It was kind of, can I remember to say this? Am I looking at the camera? Am I tapping my foot? Am I fidgeting? And it kind of all kind of turned into mush. So I was born in 1988 in Harare, and you know, Harare in Zimbabwe at that time was a very special place. People talk about it as the jewel of Africa. It was a really, really wonderful life. You know, my dad had a good job at Coca-Cola. We had a lovely house. We had a swimming pool at home. I can't ever remember not being able to swim. You know, my parents said back then, you know, children learned to swim just by being thrown in the swimming pool. You know, for me, swimming has always been like an escape. You know, the sound would kind of stop, it would muffle, and, you know, I'd feel completely free. And growing up, whether it was Zimbabwe, we moved to Lagos. Again, my dad had a good job in Nigeria. We had a swimming pool in the compound, after school, weekends, you know, some of the best times.
Did that affect you at all, moving from one country?
At 5, I was so young that, you know, it was just an adventure. I think as a family we were really excited. The one thing I remember is moving from Zimbabwe, which is almost like a Mediterranean sort of climate, quite temperate, warm, is going to Lagos for the first time, literally arriving at the airport, landing, the doors open, and it was like I couldn't breathe because it was so humid. I think Nigeria was a big culture shock compared to Zimbabwe. You know, Zimbabwe, we had a good life, and, you know, you wouldn't see poverty everywhere. But Nigeria was kind of the first place I think I really experienced that kind of real big inequality between people who have to people who don't have anything. I can't ever remember not being able to swim. You know, my parents said back then, you know, children learned to swim just by being thrown in the swimming pool. And they'd be sat on skateboards, kind of moving through the streets. And Nigeria has a massive gulf between equality and inequality. You see, I think, you know, this is something which I've spoken to my parents about. You know, my first ever nightmares as a child was about people starving, because I think to go from Zimbabwe, where it wasn't something we noticed or saw, to then going to Nigeria and having that massive stark inequality, like I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking, you know, why are people without food? So I remember that being something I really remember.
So when did you notice that you were slightly different to kids at school in the way you acted?
I have to say I didn't notice it. It's probably, my parents say it was my first teacher in the American International School who noticed it first, and then that started the chain of events of being diagnosed. I think going to an American International School, they were definitely ahead of the curve in terms of ADHD, dyslexia, because I was then diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia by the age of 7. It wasn't as straightforward as it is today. You know, my parents spent a lot of time, money and effort trying to kind of figure out what's the best way to help James, and what actual help does James need. I think the first time I started to notice it, I went to boarding school, and this is when my parents stayed in Nigeria and I went to boarding school on the Wirral, just outside Liverpool. And the reason my parents decided to send me to boarding school is to try and help with the ADHD and dyslexia. And it was probably at this point here the first time I started to notice that teachers were finding it quite difficult. It was the start of really having negative associations around learning, you know, where, you know, school was positive, it was fun, I enjoyed kind of learning new things, but I think this was the start of realising, okay, I'm finding certain things difficult, maybe I'm not reading as well as my peers, my spelling is below my peers, and then on top of that, the teachers are shouting at me and I'm constantly getting into trouble. So
telling me about having to stand up in front of the class.
I think that was probably a little bit further on. That was in secondary school, and I had an English teacher who she would set up the class in order of how well you could read. So opposite side of the classroom would be that children could read really well, and you'd get the same book, you'd be told to open it up, and then they'd start at myself, who was at the very bottom end of the class, and tell you to stand up and read. And it's demoralising, it's embarrassing, and to be the sort of person who, you know, you had lots of friends, great at sports, you know, quite popular, to then stand up and be stuttering was like, it's quite humiliating. And, you know, I would then think to myself, I'd rather get sent out, so I'd do something destructive in class to kind of get sent out, as opposed to having to stand there and make a show of myself.
So tell me about university. You dropped out after 2 years.
Live on my own, have to be responsible and self-motivated. I don't think I realised how much of an impact ADHD had on me during that period of time. You know, the, you know, impulsiveness where, you know, you'd be on your way to a lecture, someone would say or catch you off guard and then say, oh, we're doing this, and then you just go straight to the pub instead of going to lectures. So I went to very few lectures. I went out a lot, and then inevitably got to the point where I dropped out because it just wasn't working. I was on Ritalin from 8 to 16, and I would only take Ritalin during the school term.
You stopped taking it and you told me about your A-levels. How did it kind of pan out with going off Ritalin?
Yeah, it was probably, in hindsight, it was probably a mistake, but you know, you get to 16 and you've been taking this from 8, and it was kind of, you get into like this rebellious stage of looking at the world and thinking, you know, there's a part of me that was, you know, delusional and rebellious, and I'm like, is ADHD even a thing? And so I decided to stop taking it, which affected my grades, absolutely. I didn't do anywhere near as well as I could have, and I think then it then started the chain of events to then going on to university and actually it being a disaster, really. I think probably, you know, the first time where we really started to notice it is, you know, as a family we've always tried to take the kids to different activities, and you know, he'd go to gymnastics, he'd go to this place, he'd go to that place, and you know, every time you take the kids somewhere, you'd see all the kids playing or doing whatever part of the activity they're meant to be doing, and he just wasn't kind of participating in anywhere similar to what the other children were doing, you know, to the point where after the session the coaches run the session would say, you know, is he enjoying it? Does he want to be here? Because, you know, on the surface, it looked like he didn't care and he didn't want to be there. But in hindsight, you know, it was too stimulating. There's different things all over the room, and his attention has been caught by a noise or an object. And so to get him to engage and stay on track was a challenge. And I think that's, you know, it was kind of flagged up quite early. You know, you could tell that that there was possibly something. And then I think at preschool, again, it was kind of flagged up again. So I think, and with the family history, it wasn't a surprise at all. With the school, they had thought that they wanted to monitor, and they wanted to see how it developed, where I think at that point I was of the feeling that, you know, he probably had ADHD and it was just a formality. We had to kind of have it monitored and work with the school. You know, it was something, there was a part of me that was, when I found out he was diagnosed, there's a part of me that was quite sad at first, because I remembered how difficult and challenging things were for myself. But then I also understand, you know, it's also given me lots of positives as well. And so I thought, if we could get an early diagnosis, we could give as much support and help that we could, which means, you know, if we started early, an early intervention means, you know, you can make sure you're kind of getting in there before, you know, damage. You have this kind of damage that affects you later down your life.
jab. Don't throw. Little step. All right. If I say jab over here, don't jump from there. Get closer, then jab. All right. Come on. Guard up. Ready? Roll. Hook cross. Good. Roll. Good. Good. Move. Try and get to the center of the ring. Slip cross. Ready? No. Your feet are moving too much. Get back in the center. Slip. Wait for it. Get back in the center. Get back in the center. Slip cross. One more time. You've got hit the target. Eyes open. Slip cross. You're looking away. Get back in the center. Ready? You're not meant to turn your head. You're meant to slip, then throw it. Slip cross. No. Slip cross. Good. Good. Jab, hook, cross, roll. Yes. Jab to the body. I know from myself, you know, into my early 30s, there's things that happened to me as a young person that absolutely had a negative effect, which then led to lots of negative consequences. And, you know, I think having that early diagnosis, which means, you know, at school you can get the support, which the school are fantastic. It means through to secondary school, again, there's more support there, and you can give him any opportunity that he wants, because, you know, ultimately it's about him enjoying himself, growing up, feeling like he can do whatever he wants, you know. That's the most important thing. And I think that's what my parents gave me and my brothers. You know, we had that opportunity, anything we wanted, you know, I always felt like I could do, or it was in grasp. I think I had to get a job. You know, you can't leave university and then come home and just sit on the sofa. So I had to get a job, and I think it was probably the most natural kind of job for someone who's quite physical and active and sports related. So it was the first place I thought about, and I became a lifeguard. You know, once I decided being a swim teacher was something I really enjoyed, and, you know, it was something I was really good at. It happened. Learning from different business owners, learning from different swim schools, learning from different teachers, seeing the good stuff that someone's doing over here, looking at it and thinking, actually, they're not doing that so well. And I think one of the big reasons to decide to go out and set up my own business was, you know, my son was born in 2019. You know, I was working at lots of different swim schools, and I was doing okay, but was it sustainable? I want more for my child, I want more for my family, do this. And I think that's when I decided, okay, I'm gonna go out. I found a pool, I'm gonna set up my own business. I did that just before COVID, which meant I'd stopped working at some of the other places I was working at, and where some people were put on furlough, some people got grants, some people were given loans, and because the business had been running for such a short time, I didn't qualify for any of that. So I still had a mortgage to pay, and I was in that group of, I don't know if it's 1 million people who, you know, just wasn't given any support. And luckily for me, I've always had great friends, and I had a friend who owns a building company who said, you know, James, you can come and do a bit of work. And I know, looking back on it now, he did me a massive favour, because he didn't need me there. And, you know, the financial insecurity, it made me super hungry for when things did open up. I was ready to go. I was like, I'm going to work as many hours as I can. I'm going to do anything and everything to make my business a success. And it was also a good learning curve that, you know, you could start something off and be really excited about it, and then have it close down, or it all fold on top of you really quickly. So I think it's definitely, for me, it's definitely been an asset. So I think I've tried to learn different strategies and different ways to figure out that, okay, this is who I am, this is what I've got, this is the best way for me to manage it, to get the best results.
My name's Gary Blake. I'm a professional videographer for sport and events. So I essentially make video content for sports, particularly football, so football clubs, football establishments, organisations. And it started a long time ago by literally studying it at university and then picking up a camera and yeah, just sort of filming anything and everything I could do. And some years later, I managed to get into the sport I love, which is football. So essentially, I'll get a brief from a client. This could be weeks before a shoot or even sometimes even days. Sort of understand the vision, what's needed from a technical standpoint and a creative standpoint. And then following that, I prepare my kit, prepare my travel, arrive on shoot and essentially understand what the client needs and wants specifically when we're there on site and deliver it, essentially. The advice I give to anyone starting out in my career is dive in. Pick up any kind of work you can, even if it might not be in the sector you particularly want. Learn your craft, and that means gaining experience from anyone and anything that you can see a value in. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Be patient. Take your time to build your experience yourself and your kit if you are a camera person. And just keep going. I first met James in year 7, specifically I think walking from the newsagents to school. And the first conversation I remember us having was actually about the Matrix film, I think. I think from a early standpoint, I knew James was confident. He can hold a good conversation. He's got a good sense of humor. And he's almost like he is a natural leader, and he's sort of assumed that position amongst me and my friends. So yeah, he's always been a good friend to me. Yeah, I actually worked with James on his very first promotional video for Ducks to Water in its origin. And yeah, James was a pleasure to work with. He was eager for direction. He kind of knew how he wanted it to look, but obviously didn't exactly know how to get there, and I was more than keen to help him. And yeah, we had a good time shooting it, and I think it helped his business. Well, he tells me it helped his business in the early days, and yeah, from then on he's gone on leaps and bounds.
My name's Lewis John. I'm a marketing consultant, and I'm working with James to fulfill his dreams as a business owner and a personal brand. To be honest, my job is just to bring the best out of James.
When he first came to you asking for help, what was your first impression of his personal brand, his social media?
Non-existent. But over time that developed, and it really started to spiral into something else, and I could see his passion. He had more to give, but in the beginning, I don't think he saw it in himself. I think the first thing would have been his confidence. I think it's easy for someone to have passion and to kind of have a vision, but to actually implement it and actually make it happen is a completely different thing. So rewiring his self-belief and the way he sees things is key. Because if you're going to be a personal brand, if you're going to be a business owner, you're essentially selling your business to everyone else. And if you can't do that, or if you don't have the belief in yourself, then it's not going to go where you want it to go. So that was the first step. Before social media, before anything, that was the fundamental start of it. And you're going to see the leaps that he makes in the next few years. But yeah, you have to have gratitude and see where he was just, I don't know, 6 months ago from here. So he's definitely doing a great job. In the next few years, it's how can we take that passion, how can we take that expertise that he has and roll it out in a nationwide format. And the more I work with James, the more I realize that not only is this something he's good at, but it's for the nation as well, in terms of the drowning prevention aspect of things.
When we were about 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, from probably about 15 to maybe, yeah, probably from 15 to early 20s. just because it was a nice bike ride down the river. There's a guy who dived off a canal boat. I think his boat was moored up just over here on the left. Yeah. So yeah, I think this is absolutely where he was moored up, and so he was probably about 100 meters away from where we were, because we were somewhere not quite in the middle, but slightly over to the right. This is exactly, if you look over the river, you see where that black post is. That's pretty much where my brother and a few of the others were sat with their legs dangling over the edge, sat looking over, because they'd swam across. It was the 27th of July 2006. I just finished school for the last time. We were in the middle of a heat wave. It was roasting. Me and my brother and a few friends decided we were going to go down to Higginson Park, meet some friends, and then go down the river. We used to go down to a place, it was in between Hurley Lock and Temple, and it had a nice little beach where you could kind of play in the water and play in the grass. You could have a picnic. We ended up down at the spot. It wasn't really busy, but it wasn't really quiet either. As we were there, people kept arriving, and they kept laying flowers on the bank. Me and my friends, we wondered what was going on. So one of us went over and asked, and we discovered that on that exact same day that we were there, a few years earlier, 2 young boys had actually drowned at that spot. At that point, we were quite young. We didn't really pay much attention to it. We just carried on with the rest of our day. Eventually, someone got bored and said, why don't we swim across the river? So we split into 2 groups. My little brother was with one of the groups. They swam across, they made it look really easy. They got to the side, they were waving, waiting for us to come along. I was with the second group, they're a little bit more hesitant. I thought I was probably the best swimmer across the groups there, and I thought if anyone needs or gets into difficulty, I could help them out. That was a big mistake. The second group, we started to swim across. We probably got halfway across the river, and one of my friends said, James, my legs are starting to cramp up. I said, listen, you've just got to keep swimming. You've got to keep your head down and keep going. We swam for a little bit longer, and then my other friend started to say, I'm getting into difficulty now, I'm struggling. My friend who was getting cramps started to say, James, I just can't make it. I turned to the side to see how far we were, and I shouted to my brother and friends. I said, we're drowning. I shouted, we're drowning, we need help. I could see them laughing, I could see them looking at us. I'm sure they just thought we were messing around. I turned back to my friends. I said, we've just got to keep going. Both of them started to panic at that moment in time. They both grabbed me, they started to pull me under. I could feel myself fighting to come up to breathe. I shouted, you're killing me, we're drowning. All they kept doing was pulling me under and trying to keep their head afloat. We were fighting to keep our heads afloat. I could feel my body starting to struggle. I could feel my muscles weakening. I felt like my vision was starting to go, and just out of nowhere, a boat pulled up right next to us and pulled us out. It ended up being a friend of one of my friends, and he took us to the bank, and we carried on the rest of our day. We carried on playing. The strange thing is, we never really spoke about it. We never went home and told our parents. We cracked on with the day as if nothing had ever happened. You see, to be honest, to come back, it's the first time I've ever come back and really thought about it. It's much further than I imagined in my head. You know, if we were to go and talk about it, like I didn't realise it was this far. Especially for the friends I had on that day, quite a lot of them, I wouldn't expect them to get into an Olympic swimming pool and swim from one side to the other. I now know how quick panic sets in. It doesn't matter how strong a swimmer you are. If, you know, 2 friends similar size to myself, once they start to panic and they start trying to keep their head above the water, they would start pulling you under. And, you know, there's no way you'd be able to fight off two two big blokes the same size as myself in the middle of the river.